years ago, I never thought anybody would ask me for my autograph. Isn't it unbelievable? Just incredible. So, I stayed till midnight and signed my name, right? Because I never dreamed it was going to happen, but sure enough, it did. Autographs and Girl Scout cookies. I'm in the market. I really appreciate it. Everybody's doing okay? Say, I'm okay. Does anybody have 5 pages of notes already? Okay, I'm sure you're filling up your book. I appreciate that. Okay, we've got a couple of more subjects now to get through, and we got just about 55 minutes to do it. So let's get started. First, let's talk about my version of financial independence. You've heard from Brian. You've heard, some excellent advice. Dennis, these guys are long time experienced, and I'm sure you've got good notes on their presentation. This little bit I, designed long time ago. It's still valid today. Here's one of the major goals to go for: financial independence. Every American's, right, privilege to become financially independent. So here's my definition of financial independence. The ability to live, and I'll give you time to write it down. The ability to live from the income of your personally invested resources. The ability to live from the income of your personally invested resources. That's the simple definition. That from the resources you've invested, the income from those resources, you could live. Here's one of the advantages of financial independence. Now you can work or not work. Or you can certainly choose the work to do. Now you can work by choice, not by necessity. And here's one of the best: to be able to work for joy and not for necessity. At first, of course, we have to work for necessity. But if you can finally reach the point where you can work for joy, not for necessity. That happened for me all those years ago. My father kept talking about financial independence, debt-free, no one having a claim on your assets, finally being able to live from the income of your invested resources. I remember the joyful day when that finally arrived. So what I've done now, most of my life, I've had the unique privilege of working for joy, not for necessity. Not that the joy doesn't bring you more income. Not that working for joy doesn't make you another fortune. It certainly has for me, right? Another fortune and another fortune and another fortune. But not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I work now for joy and not for necessity. Key phrase to understand. We should teach this to our children. Economics is major. Everyone has to major in economics. Number one, for personal survival. To produce enough to take care of yourself. The first, economics. The next good phrase on economics. It's not what you earn, it's what you do with what you earn that makes the great difference in your financial future. All of this is determined by your own philosophy. It's important early, and kids have to have a personal philosophy working even when they go to school. Here's a good definition of your personal philosophy. A guidance system. Your personal philosophy is a guidance system. And it does simply two things. Helps you to see the opportunities, take advantage of those. Helps you to see the dangers, minimize those. And as we learn and grow, we learn hopefully early to spot the dangers so they don't overcome us. Hopefully we learn early to see the opportunities and take advantage of those, maximize them if we can. That guidance system is like a sail on a sailboat. The winds are always blowing, favorable winds, unfavorable winds, stormy winds, economic winds, political winds. The wind is always blowing. But to arrive at a predetermined destination, it is not just the blowing of the wind that we have to deal with. Here's the major part, the set of the sail. The set of the sail is what you learn, gathering information from these 3 days. Talking to each other, gathering more information, filling up one journal, then another one. Information. Guidance on how to trim the sail, set the sail. The Sunday morning sermon, the lyrics of a song, the dialogue of the movie. Words put into good structure so that they deliver enlightenment, information, knowledge. And we use that to set sail. And it isn't that you set sail once and then that's it and it's over. It is a continual setting of sail every day, every month, every year. Setting sail economically, trimming the sail. For your good health, you just have to set sail toward the destination you wish to reach, having good health. Then it's easy to neglect. Then it's easy to slide. Here's one of the better phrases. Everything by longevity tends to get off course. Everything by longevity tends to get off course. When the early astronauts made those trips to the moon, on the way to the moon, here's what they had to engage in: mid-course corrections. They look at all the gauges, and some solar winds that they didn't expect has pushed them off course as they look at the gauges. Now they must fire the little rockets to get the spaceship back on course. And it's especially critical if you're headed for the moon. If you're in an airplane and you miss Los Angeles and, make San Francisco, you're okay. But you can't miss the moon. And here's why. If you miss the moon, you can't get back. So just put this little note now. It's a pretty serious note. Some destinations are critical. Speaking of going to the moon, we just celebrated that, right? Neil Armstrong and the others. I met Neil Armstrong one time, a little talk he gave. Neil Armstrong, here's what he said in his little talk. Going to the moon was just a matter of solving a couple of problems. I thought, that's a simple way to put it. Problem number one, how to get there. And then you just figure that out, how to get there. Problem number two, what? How to get back. That's problem number two, and you just solve that. Now, he said, it's also critical not to leave until you've solved both problems. I thought that was classic. Wow, speeches and information give us so much to chew on, right? Because you know what I did in some of my enterprises? I figured out how to get in. I didn't figure out how to get out. And some cost me more than I wanted to pay. Just because I, too quickly figured how to get in, did not figure how to get out. Whether it's a lecture like we've engaged in here, hours and hours and hours, or whether it's a simple sermon, one of the most classic sermons I ever heard originated not far from here in the Crystal Cathedral. I used to do little speeches for the positive thinkers breakfast meetings at the Crystal Cathedral, before it was the Crystal Cathedral. Little sessions they had in the morning, right, where you could attend and hear some speakers. I used to do some of those speeches, 35 years ago, a long time ago. Possibility Thinkers Breakfast is what it was. His son, Schuler Jr., was giving a classic sermon one morning, and I was privileged to hear it. Here was the notes on his sermon. It's very brief, so I'll give it to you. So jot this down. These are great notes. Here was his sermon. Number 1, if you think it's impossible, it isn't. That's number 1. If you think it's impossible, it isn't. Here was point number 2. If you think you know everything, you don't. Wow, that's good. Point number 3. If you think you're alone, you're not. Isn't that a classic? That's a classic sermon. If you think it's impossible, it isn't. If you think you know everything, you don't. And if you think you're alone, you're not. Now, here was one of the spectacular stories in this little sermon. He told the story of Rich DeVos, who started the big Amway Corporation. Rich DeVos is in bad shape. Rich needs a heart transplant. And if he doesn't get it, he's not going to last very long. Now, fast forward. Rich DeVos finally gets his heart transplant. And what was spectacular about the story was, after his heart transplant, he has dinner with the lady who gave him her heart. He has dinner with the lady who gave him her heart. You say what? That's impossible. You couldn't have dinner with the person that gave you their heart. Here's what happened. This lady was desperately ill and needed a lung transplant. A donor was found, and sometimes it's much better in a lung transplant if the heart and the lung go together. So this lady gets the heart and the lung transplant that she needs to save her life. Now her heart is left over from this operation, and her heart goes to Rich DeVos. That's how Rich was able to have dinner with the lady who gave him her heart. Isn't that a fantastic story? I love those simple little stories. 1, 2, 3. A couple of illustrations. Wow. Just dramatic, dynamic. Anyway, where was I before I got off on these stories? Your philosophy. Whether it's your philosophy about economics or your philosophy about marriage or your guidance system about good health, it's easy to get off track. So by longevity, we start, and sure enough, it drifts off course. And that's what sermons are for. And that's what the lyrics of the songs are for in personal conversation, is to get us what? Back on track. Back on track. And hopefully we're not too far off track so that it doesn't take all you needed this weekend. You're doing pretty good. You've drifted a little to the left, or just by, a casual approach to some things instead of the serious approach, you're a little bit off track. And it doesn't take that long, if it hasn't gone on too long, to get back on track. But even if it's been a long time, you could start the process overnight. You can start the process. Decision making this weekend could be some of the most important of your life and your future. Not because we have given the seminars, but because the moment was right for you. and somehow it was said okay, and somehow it was delivered with sincerity, and you got the message, and this weekend makes a pivotal turn for you in terms of the set of the sale. Okay, your philosophy. Now, your philosophy about money. Someone mentioned the other day the love of money. What about money? What about success? It's a good debate. I've got a good question, and it's not necessarily a high moral question, but it's a pretty good question. If you could do better, should you? That's not a bad question. Now, all of us have personal choice, but this is a good question, and a lot of my stuff is up for debate. You know, I don't even claim to be right. If you take all these notes and throw them away and go listen to somebody else, I'll be just as happy. Because, you know, it doesn't matter. As long as you finally, right, get the ideas that make a difference for you and add to the wealth and the structure of your own life systems. That's what's important. Not that I deliver the message, that's all important. But piece by piece and speaker by speaker and teacher by teacher and phrase by phrase and book by book, we pick up the information that helps us to fine-tune our life and our future. But this is a good one for your own debate. If you could do better, should you? That's a good one. Now, let's talk about financial independence. When I meet Mr. Shoaff, I'm not in good shape. Here's where I was when I met him. Pennies in my pocket and nothing in the bank. Because the story of the Girl Scout with the cookies had just occurred in my life, and now I meet this man. Here's what he said. Now